All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to tackle a word that you are hearing absolutely everywhere: inflation. We all feel it, but what's really driving it? Is it just a string of bad luck, bad decisions, or is there something deeper going on? Let's get into it. Let's start with a feeling we all know. This quote from a CBC report just hits the nail on the head. You're standing in the grocery store, you look at the price of something you buy every week, and you just get that jolt of sticker shock. You can't help but wonder, how on earth did we get here? That feeling? That's our personal front row seat to the massive economic force of inflation.
Okay, so let's get a really clear definition down so we're all on the same page. At its most basic, inflation is the rate that prices go up. But here's the part that really matters. It's not just that things cost more, it's that the money in your wallet is worth less. That dollar just doesn't go as far as it did before. To make this crystal clear, let's use a super simple analogy.
So picture this. You've got a lemonade stand. You have exactly 5 glasses to sell. And here come 5 kids, each with a dime. Simple, right? 10 cents a glass. But then, what if one kid finds a way to easily borrow another 10 cents? Well, pretty soon they all do. Now you've got the same 5 kids, but they each have 20 cents. The problem is you still only have 5 glasses of lemonade. You've got way too much money chasing way too few goods. So what do? You raise the price to 20 cents. And boom, that, in a nutshell, is inflation. Okay, now that we've got the basics down, let's see how this played out in a real-world, high-stakes economic drama. We're going to rewind the clock to the 1970s, a period that economists are still picking apart to understand what happens when inflation goes off the rails. Now, if you've heard about the Great Inflation, you've probably heard it was all about the big OPEC oil shocks in the 70s. But what's really interesting is that research from the European Central Bank shows the trouble started way earlier. You can see on this timeline, U.S. inflation was already starting to creep up back in the mid-1960s, long before those big famous shocks hit. The fuse, it turns out, was lit years before the explosion. And this sets up the central question, the big debate that economists have been arguing about for decades. Was the crazy inflation of the 1970s just a case of terrible luck, a bunch of global events that nobody could stop? Or was it the predictable result of bad policy decisions that could have been avoided? So let's break down these two camps. On one side, you've got Team Bad Luck. Their argument is pretty straightforward. It was all about external shocks, like the oil embargoes. This is basically the "it was out of our hands" explanation. But then you have Team Bad Policy. They point the finger inward. They argue that loose money policies, breaking the dollar's link to gold, and crucially, failing to convince people that prices would stay stable, those were the real reasons things spiraled out of control. So, who's right? Was it luck or was it policy? Well, instead of just debating it, let's look at the evidence. The data from that time tells a really fascinating story when you compare how different countries handled the exact same global pressures.
Whoa, okay, just look at these numbers from the ECB report. The difference is pretty stunning. While countries like Italy and Spain saw inflation skyrocket past 25%, Germany managed to keep it under 8%. Now remember, they were all getting hit by the same oil shocks. So the big question is, what was Germany doing so differently?
Now let's bring the U.S. into the picture. As you can see, plain as day on this chart, peak inflation in the United States was nearly double Germany's rate. This huge gap is a massive piece of evidence. It strongly suggests that something more than just bad luck was at play here. It points directly to the power of policy. So what was Germany's secret weapon? It was a clear, proactive, and disciplined game plan. When the old system collapsed, Germany didn't just wait and see. They immediately put in a hard money policy. Basically, they kept a tight grip on their money supply. They made it clear to everyone that they were serious about keeping prices stable. This wasn't luck. It was a masterclass in how policy can steer an economy through a storm. The story of the 1970s is a powerful lesson, for sure, but it doesn't tell the whole story. To really get our heads around inflation, we have to look past this luck versus policy debate and bring in a third, really crucial element: structural factors. Because in many parts of the world, inflation is driven by issues that are baked right into the system.
And that brings us to a really important question. Does this framework, this Western-centric debate of bad luck versus bad policy, really explain what's happening everywhere? When you look at regions like South Asia, you have to wonder if there are more fundamental forces at work that make inflation a totally different kind of beast.
Take a look at this graph. You can just see the roller coaster ride of inflation in South Asia. These wild swings aren't just random blips. They're symptoms of much deeper structural problems. For a lot of these countries, the things that cause inflation are woven into the very fabric of their economies. And we're not talking about quick fixes here. We're talking about huge, long-term challenges. Things like weak institutions, relying on agriculture when the climate is going haywire, or being heavily dependent on importing basic necessities like food and fuel. These are vulnerabilities that can pump up inflation no matter what the government's short-term policies are.
So where does all of this leave us? What's the big takeaway? It's that inflation isn't a simple problem with a simple answer. It's not just bad luck or bad policy or structural issues alone. The real challenge, the reason it's so incredibly hard to stop, is when all of these things smash together at once, creating a perfect storm.
I mean, just look at the world right now. You've got all three drivers firing at once. You have the bad luck shocks, like wars messing up the global food supply. You have the deep structural issues, like climate change hitting crops hard. And then, on top of all that, you have the wild card, us, human psychology. When people expect prices to keep rising, they act on it. They demand higher wages, they buy things now before they get more expensive. And that behavior itself becomes fuel for the fire.
You know, if you really want to understand the challenge facing the people trying to fix this metaphor from the CBC just absolutely nails it. It's like trying to keep a dozen plates spinning in the air while riding a clumsy unicycle at night in a jungle with a tiger chasing you. It perfectly captures the sheer overwhelming complexity of the task.
And that brings us to our final thought. We've seen how inflation can be sparked by bad policy, by random shocks from out of nowhere, by the very structure of an economy, and even by our own collective expectations. So, if there's no single cause, can there ever really be a single cure? That's the question that policymakers and all of us are still grappling with. Thanks for joining us.